Welcome back, everybody. Today we're diving into a topic that I think we all struggle with sometimes.
Yeah.
Making conversation and building connections.
Yeah.
We're looking at Don Gabor's book, How to Start a Conversation and Make Friends.
Yeah.
It's packed with good advice, really practical advice.
Yeah.
And Gabor doesn't waste any time.
Right.
He really emphasizes how much of our communication is nonverbal.
Yeah. Yeah.
Did you know that over 70% of what we communicate
Wow.
is through body language alone?
It's true.
It's true.
We're constantly sending signals without even realizing it.
Right.
And Gabor highlights this with what he calls the soften technique. It's basically a checklist for making your body language more approachable.
Okay, I like it. So SOFTEN, what does that stand for?
All right. So we have smile, open posture, forward lean, touch, eye contact, and nod.
Okay.
And it sounds simple, but mastering these subtle cues can make a really big difference in how people perceive you.
Right.
Think about it. A genuine smile
Yeah.
signals warmth and openness. Uncrossing your arms and leaning in slightly shows you're engaged and receptive.
Oh, yeah.
Even something as simple as nodding along shows you're following the conversation.
Right.
Yeah.
And don't forget the T-touch. Now, before you get any ideas,
Oh, yeah.
Gabor is mainly talking about a firm handshake when you first meet someone.
Right.
It's about establishing a positive connection right from the get-go.
That initial handshake can set the tone for the whole interaction. And interestingly, Gabor suggests using touch strategically throughout the conversation. A light touch on the arm
Right.
to emphasize a point
Yeah.
or pat on the back can create a sense of camaraderie and connection.
Yeah.
But of course, reading the situation and respecting personal boundaries is key.
Of course. Of course.
Yeah.
It's like having a secret weapon for building rapport.
Yeah.
But, okay, so we've got the body language down.
Right.
What about actually breaking the ice and starting a conversation?
Well, Gabor suggests taking the initiative
Yeah.
and being the one to say hello. It's about shifting from a passive
Yeah.
to an active role.
Right.
It might feel a bit daunting at first,
Sure.
but that initial hello can open up a world of possibilities.
He recommends starting with a compliment,
Yes.
followed by what he calls a ritual question.
Yeah.
For example, you could compliment someone's unique ring and ask about the stone, or admire their awesome dance moves and ask how they learned.
Right.
Yeah.
The key here is to choose compliments
Yeah.
and questions that
Yeah.
feel genuine and specific to
Yeah.
the person
Right.
and
Okay.
the situation.
Right.
And these ritual questions aren't just about making small talk.
Okay.
They're designed to get free information.
Oh, what do you
Those little nuggets of insight
Yeah.
that can help you keep the conversation going.
So instead of asking a closed-ended question like, do you like this band?
Right.
You could ask an open-ended question like,
Right.
what kind of music are you into?
Exactly.
This invites them to elaborate,
Right.
giving you more to work with.
Open-ended questions are like keys that unlock further conversation.
Yeah.
And they help you avoid those awkward dead ends.
Right.
It can happen with simple yes or no questions.
Totally.
Yeah.
Another interesting point Gabor makes
Yeah.
is that you shouldn't be afraid to tell people what you do for a living.
Right.
He says some people find this awkward, but refusing to share this basic information can actually make you seem secretive.
It's about reciprocity.
Mm-hmm.
If you expect the other person to open up,
Okay.
you need to be willing to offer something in return.
Right.
Sharing basic information about yourself
Yeah.
shows that you're open to connecting
Okay.
on a more personal level.
He even gives an example of how this can work in a real-life scenario.
Oh, yeah.
Let's say you're dining alone in the restaurant,
Okay.
and you notice someone else is also dining solo.
Mm-hmm.
You could approach them and say something like, this is my first time here. Can you recommend something good?
That's a great example
Yeah.
of a low-pressure way to initiate a conversation. And if the person seems receptive,
Right.
you could follow up with a question like, are you waiting for someone?
Oh, yeah.
If they're not,
Right.
you could even suggest joining tables.
Turning a solitary dinner into a potential new friendship?
Exactly.
I love it.
Yeah.
But even if they decline, you've still practiced the art of starting a conversation
Right.
and putting yourself out there.
Absolutely.
It's all about building those confidence muscles.
Absolutely.
And that confidence will become even stronger
Yeah.
as you develop your active listening skills.
Right.
Gabor emphasizes that this is one of the most crucial aspects
Yeah.
of making conversation
Yeah.
and building genuine connections. He says that instead of waiting for your turn to talk,
Right.
really tune into what the other person is saying.
Yeah.
Listen for those keywords, facts,
Yeah.
and feelings.
Right.
He calls these nuggets of information free information gold.
Yes.
And for good reason.
Absolutely.
They're the building blocks for meaningful conversations.
Active listening is about being present in the moment
Right.
and truly absorbing
Yeah.
what the other person is communicating. It's about making them feel heard, understood, and valued.
And it's amazing how much you can learn about someone simply by paying attention to what they're saying
Yeah.
and how they're saying it.
Gabor actually points out that a good listener can often anticipate what the speaker is going to say next.
Oh, really?
This demonstrates that you're fully engaged and interested,
Okay.
and it can help you uncover common ground
Okay.
and shared interests.
He also introduces this intriguing concept
Yes.
called iceberg statements.
Yeah.
Have you ever noticed how sometimes people will hint at a bigger story without revealing all the details?
Oh, yeah.
Like when someone says, "You won't believe what happened to me today."
Oh, yeah.
Right? Those are iceberg statements.
Those are iceberg
so-
statements. They're like little glimpses into a hidden world.
Yeah.
And they're a fantastic opportunity to dig deeper and encourage the other person to elaborate. A simple "what happened" can unlock a treasure trove of fascinating stories and insights.
So once you've gathered all this free information,
Yes.
Gabor encourages you to use it to
Yes.
ask insightful follow-up questions.
Exactly.
It shows you're genuinely curious and invested in the conversation.
Right.
He even compares it to a treasure hunt,
Yeah.
where each question uncovers a new gem of information.
It's a brilliant analogy.
Oh.
By actively listening and asking thoughtful questions, you're essentially unearthing hidden treasures within each conversation.
I love that.
Yeah.
But Gabor stresses that it's important to avoid brain picking, especially with professionals.
Right.
Constantly asking for advice or insights without offering anything in return can be a turnoff.
It's all about striking a balance. Just as you're seeking information,
Right.
be ready to share some of your own free information as well.
Okay.
The conversation should feel like a two-way street where both people are contributing
Yeah.
and learning from each other.
So we've covered body language,
Yeah.
initiating conversations, asking open-ended questions,
Yeah.
mastering the art of active listening.
Yeah.
It's like we're building a conversational toolkit, piece by piece.
I like it.
But how do we know how much is too much to share?
Right.
That's where the concept of self-disclosure comes in.
This is a common concern.
Yeah.
We worry about oversharing and revealing too much too soon.
Right.
But Gabor reassures us that self-disclosure isn't about spilling all our deepest secrets. It's about gradually revealing more about ourselves as the conversation progresses and trust is established.
Okay.
He actually breaks it down into 4 levels.
Okay.
It starts with simple greetings
Yeah.
and sharing basic facts. Then, as the conversation deepens, we can move on to sharing opinions and feelings. Finally, when a strong sense of trust has been established, we can share more personal experiences and vulnerabilities.
What's interesting is that Gabor encourages revealing your goals and struggles.
Right.
This might seem counterintuitive, but it can actually create a powerful sense of connection.
What's interesting is that Gabor encourages revealing your goals and struggles.
This might seem counterintuitive, but it can actually create a powerful sense of connection.
It's in those moments of vulnerability that true connection is forged.
Right.
And that's what makes conversations so fascinating.
Yeah.
They offer us a glimpse into the shared human experience
Yeah.
with all its complexities and contradictions.
Wow, we've covered so much ground already.
Yeah,
But there's still more to explore.
right.
You know, one thing that always makes me feel more connected to someone is when they remember my name.
Oh, yeah.
It's like this instant signal that they see me, they value our interaction.
That's such a great point. And Gabor actually dedicates a whole section to the art of remembering names.
Oh, wow.
He acknowledges how common it is to forget names, especially in those initial introductions.
Right.
But he also provides some really effective techniques for improving our name recall.
Okay. I'm all ears because I'll admit I've definitely been in those situations where I've completely blanked on someone's name.
Oh.
Even moments after meeting them.
It happens.
It's so embarrassing.
It happens to the best of us. And Gabor points out that often it's not even that we're bad at remembering.
Right.
It's that we're not fully present during the introduction.
Okay.
We're so caught up in our own anxieties or thinking about what we're going to say next that we don't actually absorb the name in the first place.
That makes so much sense.
Yeah.
It's like our brains are on overdrive and the name just slips through the cracks.
Yeah.
So how do we combat this? How do we become more present and actually register those names?
Well, Gabor emphasizes the importance of focusing your attention completely on the person during the introduction.
Okay.
Make eye contact, smile genuinely, and most importantly, repeat their name back to them.
Okay.
This not only helps solidify the name in your memory,
Right.
but it also signals to the other person that you're truly interested in knowing them.
It's like you're consciously telling your brain, this is important, pay attention. But what if, despite our best efforts, we still miss the name?
Don't panic. Gabor says it's perfectly fine to ask the person to repeat their name,
Oh,
or even to spell it if it's unusual.
right.
Most people are understanding, especially if you frame it in a way that shows you're genuinely trying to remember. Something like, I'm so sorry, I want to make sure I got your name right. Could you repeat that for me?
Yeah, it's much better to ask for clarification than to fumble through the rest of the conversation,
Yeah.
feeling awkward and unsure. Gabor also suggests some creative techniques for linking the name to a visual image.
Right.
This can be particularly helpful for those of us who are more visually oriented.
One technique is to create a mental picture of the moment you were introduced,
Okay.
associating it with the name. It's like taking a mental snapshot of the interaction, capturing the details that make it unique. You can even link the name to a distinctive feature.
Okay.
For example, if someone has strikingly blue eyes, you might picture their name written in bright blue ink. Or if their name is Mr. Carpenter, you could imagine them building something out of wood.
I love how these techniques tap into the power of association.
Yeah,
Our brains are wired to make connections.
right.
And the more vivid and unusual the connection, the more likely we are to remember it.
Exactly. Gower even encourages using humor and exaggeration to create memorable images.
Okay.
The sillier the image, the more likely it is to stick in your mind. For instance, if someone's name is Mrs. Baker and they have a big laugh, you could picture them tossing loaves of bread into the air while they're laughing.
Okay, that's hilarious. I could definitely see how that would be hard to forget. But what about those situations where you're meeting a whole group of people at once? How do you keep all those names straight?
That can definitely be a challenge. Gabor recommends repeating each name out loud as they're introduced.
Okay.
This helps reinforce the information
Right.
and gives you a chance to double check that you heard it correctly.
Mm-hmm.
Plus, it shows the other people that you're making an effort to remember their names, which they'll appreciate.
Yeah, it's like you're actively engaging with the information instead of passively letting it wash over you. Another technique he suggests is creating a letter chain, using the first letter of each person's name.
Oh, yeah?
For example, if you meet Sarah, David, Emily, and Tom, that would be SDET.
You can even create a silly story or phrase using those letters to further cement the sequence in your mind. For example, Sarah drove Emily to town.
love it.
It's like giving your brain a fun little mnemonic device to help those names stick.
So we've covered a lot of ground already.
Yeah.
Body language, starting conversations, asking open-ended questions, active listening, self-disclosure, and now remembering names. It's amazing how much goes into having successful conversations.
Right.
But let's move beyond those initial interactions. What about keeping a conversation flowing, especially once we've exhausted the usual small talk?
Well, Gabor provides some fantastic insights for just that. He emphasizes the importance of focusing on the situation you're in, identifying common ground, discussing topics that are important to you, and changing topics smoothly using the free information you've gathered.
I love how he frames conversation as this dynamic interplay between observation, engagement, and shared interests. So what does he mean by focusing on the situation? Can you give us an example?
Absolutely. Let's say you're at a party feeling a bit lost in the crowd.
Okay.
Instead of focusing inward on your own anxieties, Gabor suggests looking outward.
Okay.
What's happening around you? What are other people doing? What brought you to this particular gathering? By tuning into your surroundings, you can find natural conversation starters.
It's like you're taking cues from the environment itself rather than putting pressure on yourself to come up with something brilliant to say. It also creates a shared experience to connect over.
Exactly. And once you've connected over the shared experience, it's easy to branch out and explore other topics. For example, if you're at a book signing, you could ask the person next to you what their favorite book by that author is, or what they're currently reading.
Gabor actually provides a great example in the book.
Oh, yeah.
He describes two people, Don and Mary, who are signing up for a racquetball class.
Okay.
They strike up a conversation by talking about their reasons for taking the class, their previous experience with racket sports, and even whether they've tried the food at the club's lounge.
Oh, wow.
It's all based on their shared experience of being in that specific environment.
And from there, the conversation can naturally expand outward.
Right.
They could discuss their work, their hobbies, their favorite places to eat in town. The possibilities are endless. By starting with the common ground of the situation, they've created a platform for a more meaningful connection.
So focusing on the situation provides a great starting point. But Gabor also talks about finding what he calls hot buttons. What are those exactly?
Hot buttons are those areas of interest that really light someone up. They're the topics they can talk about with genuine passion and enthusiasm. It could be their work, a hobby, an upcoming trip, a cause they care about, anything that sparks their excitement.
I love how he phrases it. Find the really big things in people's lives and encourage them to talk about them. It's like finding the key that unlocks their inner world. But how do we actually identify those hot buttons in a conversation?
It's all about paying attention to those free information clues they're giving you. Let's say someone casually mentions that they're training for a marathon.
Okay.
That's a hot button. You could ask them about their training regimen, what inspired them to run a marathon, or even what their favorite running routes are.
Or maybe they mention that they're a volunteer at an animal shelter.
Right.
That's another opportunity to tap into a passion. You could ask them about their favorite animals, the challenges and rewards of volunteering, or even how they got involved in the first place.
Exactly. And remember, it's a two-way street. Just as you're seeking out their hot buttons, be ready to share your own passions as well. It's about creating that sense of mutual enthusiasm and discovery.
Gabor also stresses the importance of balance in a conversation.
Right.
It shouldn't feel like one person is dominating the conversation while the other just passively listens. He compares it to a game of catch the conversational ball should be passed back and forth.
And this is where those active listening skills we discussed earlier become so crucial.
Right.
By truly paying attention to what the other person is saying, you'll not only gain valuable insights,
Yeah.
but you'll also have plenty of material to keep the conversation flowing and ensure that the exchange feels balanced and engaging.
He also gives some tips for changing topics gracefully.
Right.
Don't be afraid to jump around if something sparks your interest. It's perfectly fine to say something like, that reminds me of, or speaking of, to smoothly transition to a new topic.
And if someone brings up a topic that's negative or inappropriate, Gabor suggests gently steering the conversation in a different direction.
Okay.
You could say something like, I'm sure we can find more pleasant things to talk about, or I'll forgive you for asking that question if you'll forgive me for not answering it.
It's all about maintaining a positive and respectful tone, even when navigating those potentially tricky conversational waters. All right, so we've covered how to initiate conversations, keep them flowing, and even remember names, like a memory champion. But what about knowing when and how to gracefully exit a conversation?
Right.
We've all been in those situations where a conversation starts to, fizzle out.
Yeah.
Or maybe you're just ready to move on and mingle with other people.
It's definitely an art form.
Yeah.
Exiting a conversation without seeming abrupt or rude, Gabor actually refers to these as escape routes.
Okay.
And he emphasizes ending on a high note, not when the conversation has completely fizzled out.
So it's kind of like ripping off a Band-Aid.
Yeah.
Freaking clean.
In a way, yes. But with a bit more finesse, of course.
Right.
Gabor suggests briefly summarizing the main points of the conversation,
Okay.
which demonstrates that you were actively listening and understood what the other person was saying. It also signals that you're ready to wrap things up.
So, for example, if you've been discussing current events, you might say something like, it sounds like you've really given this a lot of thought. I'm definitely going to check out that article you mentioned.
Precisely. And if you genuinely want to see this person again, Gabor stresses the importance of making a specific plan.
Okay.
Rather than just vaguely saying, let's hang out sometime.
Right.
Suggest grabbing coffee next week or seeing a movie together.
Yeah.
Something concrete that shows you're serious about connecting again.
It makes total sense. Otherwise, it can be one of those well-intentioned social niceties that never actually materializes. But what about those situations where you really do need to make a quick escape? Like you're cornered by someone who just won't stop talking, or maybe the conversations has taken an uncomfortable turn.
Ah, yes, the dreaded conversational black hole.
Yeah.
Gabor has some strategies for those scenarios, too. He suggests waiting for a natural pause in the conversation and then interjecting with a few quick yes or no questions to gently interrupt their flow.
So it's kind of like reclaiming control of the conversational tennis match.
Right.
But isn't that a bit risky? Could it seem rude?
It's definitely a delicate balance. Gabor emphasizes doing it politely and respectfully.
Okay.
You can acknowledge their last few statements and then gracefully excuse yourself. Something like, it sounds like you're really passionate about this. I'm going to grab a drink, but it was great chatting with you.
And then maybe you make a beeline for the restroom, even if you don't actually need to go, just to buy yourself a little breathing room.
Gabor also addresses those situations where someone is being pushy or trying to manipulate you into doing something you don't want to do. Maybe it's a persistent salesperson, or perhaps your boss is pressuring you to take on yet another project. Right. Those situations require a different kind of assertiveness. Gabor recommends calmly and repeatedly stating what you want, almost like a broken record.
Okay.
A simple, I'm not interested or I'm not available can be surprisingly effective.
And no need to get into a big debate or justify yourself. Just a firm, polite, and consistent refusal. But, as Gabor points out, assertiveness isn't the same as being selfish.
Right.
It's about finding that balance between advocating for your own needs and being considerate of others.
Speaking of things that can be tricky to navigate, what about those moments when you realize you just don't know something?
Oh,
It's
yeah.
so tempting to pretend you're in the loop even when you have no idea what the other person is talking about.
Oh, I've definitely been there. Trying to subtly Google the topic under the table while pretending to listen intently.
Right?
But Gabor actually says it's perfectly fine to admit you don't know something.
Yeah.
In fact, it can be a refreshing change of pace.
I agree. It shows humility and a willingness to learn. Gabor suggests simply saying something like, I'm not familiar with that. Can you tell me more?
Yeah.
It can actually spark a more engaging and informative conversation.
And it takes the pressure off of having to pretend you're an expert on everything.
Yeah.
Gabor also addresses that common feeling of, I'm boring, I have nothing interesting to say. He calls that a cop-out.
He believes that everyone has unique experiences and perspectives to share.
Right.
It's about finding what truly lights you up and sharing that with others. Don't be afraid to talk about your passions, your hobbies, your quirky observations about the world.
He reminds us that we don't need to put on a show or pretend to be someone we're not. Authentic connection comes from embracing our individuality and sharing our genuine selves. And one thing I really appreciate about Gabor's approach is his acknowledgement that silence isn't always a bad thing.
Absolutely. In fact, well-placed pauses can actually enhance a conversation. They can allow for reflection, create a more natural flow, and even add a sense of intimacy.
It's a reminder that conversation is a dance, not a race.
Right.
We don't need to fill every silence with words. Sometimes those moments of quiet can be just as powerful, if not more so, than the words themselves.
Well said. Gabor's book offers such a rich tapestry of insights and practical techniques for improving our conversational skills. It's really about approaching conversations with curiosity, authenticity, and a genuine desire to connect.
I couldn't agree more. And remember, even if you just implement a few of Gabor's suggestions, you're likely to notice a difference in your interactions. So go out there, be the one to say hello, embrace those moments of awkwardness, and watch as your world expands through the power of conversation.
Have a great week, everyone.
See ya.